Good morning, YouTube and social media. So, today I'm bringing you a dose of Monday motivation, and what I'd like to talk about is real quick. There's this guy, David Allen, wrote this book, New York Times bestseller, called Getting Things Done. And I personally was struggling a lot with productivity. How do I stay on top of things? I had a lot of anxiety, nervousness, um, you know, constantly feeling like uh, the life was coming at me, and I have to um, kind of stay on top of my toes all the time in order to kind of, you know, do stuff, to be efficient, or how do I, maintain and keep a momentum of productivity and keep a flow when I feel so wrecked and feel like life is coming at me 100 miles an hour, especially with 2018 with all these, I have so many different apps and screens and what have you, constantly notifications, bings, buzzes, this, that, and the other, calendar invitations, no, you name it. And I'm just a 24-year-old entrepreneur, so anyone in the corporate world, I can only imagine how much more they have to put up with. Any like higher level executives and what have you might have to put up with, and even people in general. I feel like today are very easily distracted, and no fault of their own. They just haven't put in place the right kind of frameworks. So what this book right here, Getting Things Done, what he talks about, and this actually gave me a lot of clarity, is um, your mental bandwidth. Think of your brain as a computer, and think of all the things that you feel like you need to do as kind of actions or tasks that are clogging up your mental RAM, because your brain is constantly trying to remind you, oh, you have to do this. Oh, there's also that thing. And oh, did you remember? And then you find yourself throughout the day kind of going with the flow of your thoughts, but not really, being able to make sense, or, have good clarity, good grasp, and feel like you're actually in control. So, what he recommends, and, you know, this has been massively beneficial to me. Take a couple of hours where you're not going to take any phone calls, look at any notifications. You have no email, nothing. Just shut yourself away from the world. And if you're wasting an hour a day, and I promise you, most people are wasting more than that, you can definitely schedule yourself 2 hours with yourself, and essentially you want to write down all the things that are on your mind, everything. So, um, you know, everything you might want to do, everything you need to do, everything you have to do, everything you feel like you would do, even things that are somewhat obscure or don't make sense. Don't think about organizing any of this. Don't think about prioritizing any of this. Don't think about doing anything besides clearing your mental bandwidth, which means completely pulling everything from your brain, capturing it on paper or other digital tools. I prefer paper. I think it's more powerful somehow in being able to capture your thoughts than any other digital alternative. You can go around and switch it back onto something. So basically, you put it down in paper, and then you can put it into any other digital tool you have later on. But a couple of hours, and don't stop until you have at least 100 plus items, 150 items, because it doesn't matter who you are, I promise you, you have at least 100 plus things on your brain. And one of those things could be going to the Bahamas, or taking that vacation, or learning tap dancing. And just don't think about where all of this fits in or how it makes sense. Just put it down. The next thing you want to do, once you have everything down, is now you're going to try and get some clarity on it. So you want to decide on, okay, so something like a particular project like learning tap dancing. Is that something you want to do immediately? Is that something that you can, what is the immediate next physical action you can take for any of those things? That's kind of what you're trying to decide. So everything that you have on your list, for example, build a website. Okay, what's the next physical action you can take for building your business website? Probably you can register with something like Squarespace or well, something like Squarespace or something like Shopify or something like that. And so you probably register with that. That would be your next step. Don't go ahead and do it yet. Just write everything down. And the system you're trying to build is you're going to end up with 4 lists. So one list is going to be your next actions. That is your immediate next actions that you're going to do as soon as possible. The next list you're going to have is going to be a someday or maybe list, and that's just like going to the Bahamas. Might be something you want to do someday, not necessarily the very next thing you want to do. Um, and then you want to decide on certain things. Are they for reference, or what have you? And so basically, let me show you this diagram that we have here. That's in the book. Okay, so you have all of your stuff, all of your stuff. Oh, trying to get a good angle for you guys. You have all the stuff in your basket, and you want to decide on what is it. Is it actionable? No. Does it go to the trash? Is it something that goes into a someday or maybe list or file? Is it something that's actually a reference? For example, a link to a website or a book, or a restaurant menu, or what have you. Is it actionable? Yes. Okay, what's the next immediate action you can take on it? If it's anything that requires more than one step, up to 3 steps or more, it's probably a project. And it's not project in the classical sense of building a business might be a project, or like teaching your son, you know I'm not sure, but basically, it's not in the classical sense. It's like anything that has more than a few steps is a project, and you want to kind of plan that out and review it for next actions. So what's the next action? If it takes less than 2 minutes, and this is probably the most useful rule here, if it's something that takes less than 2 minutes, then you want to do it immediately. And if it's not something that takes less than 2 minutes, you want to decide on, okay, do I need to delegate that action and wait for someone else? So that's your third list, is waiting for someone else to do or to get back to you. So for example, you want to get a quote on your insurance. Now the first step might be, okay, call the insurance company and give them all the necessary information and documents for them to be able to generate a quote for you. Once you've done that, it might take them a little while, and so the next you're doing is just waiting on them to get back to you. And if it's not something that needs to be delegated to someone and waited on, then it's something that you need to defer, which means it'll either go into your calendar, and your calendar is sacred territory. Never, 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 ever put anything besides something that absolutely needs to be done at a particular time or with someone at a particular date or time onto your calendar. Everything else needs to go onto your next actions list. And so essentially what you're going to end up with is 4 lists. It's either you're waiting for somebody on something, you're going to end up with your major overarching projects that have more than a few steps, and you're going to know all the immediate next actions. Now, the best way to implement this methodology is, if it can be done in 2 minutes, you want to get it done right away, like I said before already. And if it's on your next actions list, I don't care if the second action is a phone call with Michelle Obama and the first action is doing your laundry. You can never, ever, ever nitpick your actions. They have to follow through on the order that they've been put down in, because if you don't do that, then you don't build trust with yourself on following through with the system, and then the system breaks. If you don't have trust in the system, your mind basically goes numb to it. This is why to-do lists and checklists and all these other simple productivity tools that have been devised over the past centuries seem to not really work well for people, is because you haven't built trust with it, because you're nitpicking, or something seems more exciting, or something seems like you can gravitate more towards because it's more engrossing to you, or whatever the case may be. But basically, you want to build trust with your system that you're putting into place, which means whatever's on your calendar must be done at the time that it's on your calendar, unless, of course, life gets in the way. And what you want to do is kind of loosely experiment with putting this system into place and what kinds of tools you might use, whether it's a notepad and a calendar, something more digital, some software tools that might be available to you, email, whatever the case may be. You want to sort of spend some time trying to implement this methodology with the different tools that you might use. So, for example, I was using a loose leaf notepad for a while, and I've switched over to a Moleskine. I think it gives it more of a formal structure. It feels different for me. I like to be able to carry that around. Something about putting pen to paper definitely works well for me because for some reason it just feels more committed to me. It's like putting something down on digital ink is something somewhat of a non-committal action to me mentally, at least how I perceive it, and so it doesn't lock me in enough. Um, but essentially, that's my dose of Monday motivation for you guys, and I hope you guys were able to take back something from it. I know that perhaps I didn't do the very best job in explaining this, but essentially, you know, you get the gist of how the system is supposed to work. You capture everything on your mind. You then decide what the immediate next action in the physical world there is that you can do for it. Then you want to organize it into your different lists, whether it's something that can be done in 2 minutes and you do it immediately, whether it's something that needs to be delegated to be done at a particular time, which means it's being scheduled, and so that's your fourth list, or if it's something that's just going to go into your next actions list to do as soon as you possibly can. And that's essentially the system. All right? Until next time.